I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. I'm Islip Town Supervisor Tom Croci, and I'm very happy to be here today to communicate with our town. And I'm so proud to be joined by so many community leaders, both civic associations and chambers of commerce, to be joined by our town board, Councilman John Cochran, Councilman Anthony Sempt, our town clerk, Olga Murray, our town receiver of taxes, Alexis White. And we're here today to talk about very serious matters in our town and to discuss the future of our town. I'd also like to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this. We said early on that we were going to present to the town our findings with regard to our current financial situation, and I'd like to now bring up Councilman Steve Flotteron, who has chaired our budget task force, to show you some of our initial findings. Councilman.
Thank you, Supervisor. Back in January, Supervisor Tom Croci asked if I would steer a task force to recommend how to tackle the looming $26 million deficit that he inherited. I was asked to lead on this task force because of my experience as a senior member of the town board, my scrutiny of the budget and the budget process, and the wasteful spending over the last 5 years, and because of my 25-plus year experience in financial and business experience. My charge from the supervisor and the town board was to determine where we are now and how did we get here. How over the last 10 years the town's financial condition changed so dramatically. Our town grew its fund balance by $33 million from 2002 to 2007. Most of that balance has evaporated. Our task force so far includes the town's Director of Economic Development, Bill Mannix, who has served under 7 supervisors since 1981. Rick Lazio, the former congressman and the leader of the supervisor transition team, and Professor Ed Gullison, chairman of the economics department at Dowling College and a staff economist for the President Ronald Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors. Recently, others have stepped forward to help the task force. They are Joe Porio of Ronkonkoma, who was Chief Deputy Controller of Suffolk County for 19 years and is a former Brookhaven Town Deputy Finance Commissioner. Also who stepped forward is Edward Bogle, a Sayville resident who was a budget director for Suffolk County and was in 6 administrations he's worked with in different levels in Suffolk County. Others will join us as we get deeper into our work. We spent a great deal of time digging into the town's finances, and today Mr. Mannix is going to go into detail about some of our findings. First, however, I'd like to introduce Professor Gullison from Dowling College, who would like to share some thoughts on our current situation. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. The current abysmal budgetary situation faced by the town of Islip is not unlike a myriad of municipalities across the U.S. During the economic boom experienced across the U.S. in the years immediately preceding the 2008 financial meltdown, a myopic view pervaded budgetary practices across the country, including the town of Islip. Revenue projections were overly optimistic, leading to spending initiatives that could not be sustained in the event of a significant economic downturn many did not anticipate or want to anticipate. The 2008 financial meltdown devastated budgets across the U.S., including the town of Islip's. After peaking at $80.7 million in 2006, town revenues declined sharply thereafter and were $71.9 million in 2011. This was due in large measure to the significant decline in the town's tax base that included a drop in revenue raised from the mortgage tax resulting from the bursting of the housing bubble. Even though since 2007 expenses trended lower, they were not reduced sufficiently to prevent budget deficits which began to mount. The town of Islip's projected fiscal year 2013 budget deficit is a staggering $26 million as a result. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. And now if Mr. Mannix would please come up to detail some of our findings.
Thank you, Councilman Flotteron. Good morning, everybody. This is sobering news to someone who has spent over 30 years in the employment of town of Islip. But research by our budget task force has uncovered various factors that have resulted in a potential 2013 $26 million town budget deficit. These include economic factors resulting from the recession, as the professor has just mentioned, which, among other things, reduced employment, cut mortgage tax receipts, and hurt local businesses in general. A failure by the prior administration to curtail spending at a time when revenues were declining, a reliance on surplus funds to keep taxes from rising, and careless spending on such things as raises for selected top executives, purchases of unnecessary equipment and technology, and a failure by the town to enforce and collect parking violation fees. First, let's look at the fund balance. The chart on my left demonstrates that Islip's fund balance rose from $42.3 million in 2002 to a peak of $75.4 million in 2007. And since then, the trend has been in decline all the way to $49.1 million in 2011. The chart on my right demonstrates that during the same time period, town revenues rose from $76.7 million to a peak of $89.7 million in 2006. Since then, revenues, which are demonstrated by the green line, have declined sharply, and in 2011 totaled $71.9 million. The town's expenses, which is the red line, remained steadily below revenues during the 2002 to 2006 period. Expenses in 2002 were $71.6 million, and they rose steadily through 2007 to $89 million when they first exceeded revenues by $3.1 million. Since 2007, although expenses trended lower, they still exceeded revenues in every year through 2011, when the gap was $12.7 million. That gap continues to widen, and the proposed level of expenditures the town faces cannot be supported. That's the very definition of a structural deficit. How did we get here? Economic forces beyond town hall's control significantly shape the town's financial health. Core town services are funded by the General Operating Fund, which relies heavily on property taxes, mortgage tax receipts, and franchise fees. These resources have been battered over the last 4 years as the recession diminished property values, forced home foreclosures, and curtailed home sales. Moreover, unemployment has reduced individual spending and corporate investment. In each of the last 4 years, the town has experienced structural budget deficits in which ongoing revenues were not sufficient to meet ongoing expenditures. Regrettably, the prior administration did not thoughtfully address these deficits by selectively reducing expenditures and services and establishing more efficient operating models. The looming financial distress was ignored. Recommendations to the supervisor by the town comptroller to either trim expenses or increase revenues went unheeded, and prior year's surpluses were exploited. In the 2012 budget, $17.3 million of surplus funds were earmarked to balance the budget. Significantly, difficult decisions were postponed, perhaps in the hope that the economy might rise in the near future. This, of course, hasn't happened. In addition, the prior administration deferred a state pension plan payment totaling $8 million until 2013, and decisions were made not to issue bonds for short-term borrowing. Spending, particularly, was unwisely done in past years. Among the most egregious examples of wasteful spending, in 2011, the Town Department of Public Works spent $3,535 to detail street sweepers and 2 vacuum trucks, which are used to clean out sewers. You'll see some of these vehicles parked in front of Town Hall this morning. Our equipment operators were not permitted time during the course of their workdays to address the maintenance and cleaning of the equipment. This resulted in more downtime, more breakdowns, and more money spent on parts and cleaning. We are scratching our heads over why anyone would hand clean and wax vehicles to make them look showroom new when they were just going to go back on the streets and get dirty. What's more, the town public safety department in past years spent thousands of dollars detailing its vehicles twice a year. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on paving equipment that was never used by the Department of Public Works because it didn't suit the operating conditions in Islip and the way our public employees do their jobs. The town's information technology department spent $97,000 on contracts for computer software and data services that were never installed and never used. The town acquired 100 personal computers with the wrong operating systems, requiring 2 months of work by 2 full-time town employees to make the necessary changes. In 2009, the supervisor gave out raises of as much as $15,000 to various employees, while at the same time he laid off approximately 40 employees. In 2007, the supervisor directed the Department of Public Works to use outside mechanics to repair town vehicles to make up for reduced staff and reduced overtime. One manager cited the private cost of a brake job at $1,000, while an Islip Fleet Services mechanic working out of his title could have done the same for a pay differential of just $36. In addition, the town failed to collect fines on more than 12,000 parking tickets issued during the past 3 years, due in part to increased ticketing at a time when the town reduced the size of the staff involved in processing the tickets. Fines on those unpaid tickets doubled every 30, 60, or 90 days, and many remain unpaid. Some of these unpaid tickets may bring in as much as $770 each. Our backlog of unpaid tickets totals an estimated $1.5 million at a minimum. Please let Councilman Flotteron know if you'd like to see our cabinets filled with these tickets. I'll turn it back to Steve.
So there you have it. Rather than kicking the can further down the street, as we've done in the past, the can now rests at the feet of the current administration. Decisions that could have been taken in previous budget cycles weren't, and results has complicated our budget for 2013. The Budget Task Force intends to cast a wide net to find ways for the town to continue delivering services while figuring out a way to deal with the deficit without raising taxes. Other members of the town board are working with various departments under the purview to find ways to work more efficiently and reduce expenses. I'm proud to say with our new board, the business experience and their entrepreneur background it's great to work with. Tough decisions will be required to solve these issues, and now tough decisions, as I said, tough decisions will be required to solve these issues. And at this time, if there's any questions for the members from the members of the media, copies of the task force report, including charts, invoices, our media kits are over by the door, and our supervisor and my colleagues from the board are here for any comments. Thank you for coming. And we'll take any questions if you have them. You want to do this afterwards, or you want to at the podium? Very good. Councilman. Yes.
Hi. The company that was used to detail all of these cars, is it a local company?
Yes, absolutely.
And has it been used this year in this administration at all to detail cars?
If it was a prior contract, it may have been, we of course always fulfill our contractual obligations, so if it was entered into in prior administration, then we most likely fulfilled our contractual obligations, but I can get you the specifics on that.
Okay.
Supervisor Croci,
Yes.
I'm sure that the previous administration will probably bring up the fact that this is not exactly a bipartisan task force.
Well, we looked at the best minds and people who had experience with budgets that worked. Experience from the past, both with the county, with towns, to really look at the key causes of our structural deficit. So we were looking for people who would lend their experience, who would lend their talents, and had a proven track record of success. And that starts with Professor Gullison, Mr. Porio, and Bogle, who both have experience with successful budgets.
Hi, have you thought about going to the SEC to blame the previous administration on perhaps giving false data to the bond rating agencies?
No, I don't think we've risen to that level, and the comptroller certainly has never suggested that that was the case. What we are doing is ensuring that the expenditures that have occurred in the previous years no longer cause us to face a structural deficit. So the bond rating agencies, to my knowledge and the comptroller's knowledge, have always been given correct information.
Just looking at the numbers on the chart there, it looks like expenditures were going up at a higher rate prior to the prior administration. And how are you going to curtail those expenditures going forward? How much of those are, say, employee expenses that you can't lower?
The expenditures that were going up before the prior administration, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That occurred at a time when the mortgage tax revenue receipts were very high, and the spending at the time was appropriate for the revenues that were coming into being. That, of course, the bottom fell out of that. As far as the expenditures going forward, it's going to be a combination of the reduction in expenditures. It's going to be a combination of looking at public-private partnerships, the way we can do business better as a town. This town board has a lot of experience outside of government, and we mean to bring that kind of experience, the kind of experience that the business owners and civic leaders in this room know, that sometimes you wear multiple hats and you do multiple jobs. Our council members are not only council members, but they're now liaisons with each of the departments and agencies within our town. And they're going to use that insight to try to find better ways of doing business so the town can generate revenue from sources that were previously losers.
I could also add, so more of what I was even asking when I was on the board prior, is the cost-benefit analysis. Is it cheaper to do it in-house, or is it cheaper to go out? Sometimes, in both cases, different situations, you might have to increase one department employee or two, and other departments you might reduce. One example, or just even recently, the town attorney's office had some legal work being done outside, which costs hundreds of dollars per hour. We're doing it in-house. A lot of our part-time attorneys make $30 an hour. As you know, if you ever went to an attorney outside, they're $300, $400 or more dollars per hour. So one little move we did recently saved us $40,000 right there. So doing cost-benefit analysis on everything we look at.
Yes.
Can you anticipate at this time what you'll be able to save in the next year's budget, just kind of going through this with a fine-tooth comb and taking out all of these?
That is the next phase of this process, which has begun. The first phase was to identify the problem. How did we get here? I think we're all in our lives know that if you want to address a problem, you better know what the problem is, the depth and the breadth of it, and then address it. So we've done that. We've figured out where the structural deficit came from, and now it's a task of the budget task force and each of the members of the council with their liaison commissioners, as well as the members who are joining us with specific municipal budgetary experience, to come up with a plan with our comptroller to determine exactly how we're going to close this gap in such a short period of time. So there's more work to do. Yes, sir.
Town of Islip provides a lot of good services for its people that we live in. Do you foresee any cut in our services, especially like the summer programs that you have for the children, things that the town does for its residents?
Obviously, we don't want our residents to be hurt by this crisis. We're all going to have to tighten our belts. We're certainly doing it here in Town Hall, but we're going to have to do that throughout the town. As far as the services, it's our goal to provide almost transparently the kind of cost savings that we need to implement within the departments and agencies without it dramatically affecting what the taxpayer, what the resident is experiencing with regard to service. So if we can make that invisible to you and still save money, that's what we're looking to do. Yes, ma'am.
Was there a quid pro quo with the companies that were used? Could contributors to the campaign funds of the people that were doing the mismanagement of the money, or was it just in confidence?
I think you'll be hearing more about that in coming weeks as the different council people report out with their commissioners on what they found department by department.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes, ma'am.
As I look at this paperwork, and I see the $3,545, to me, that's a drop in the bucket, the $26,000. And I don't know that it was worth being mentioned there. I don't know what the reason was. However, what is important to me is the 12,000 parking tickets, and I'd like to know how you're going to try to gather that money, because that is a big way of reducing our deficit.
The specific examples we gave today, the street sweepers, was a cultural example.
Okay.
That in an individual basis, sure, that one little expenditure doesn't matter. That one little expenditure doesn't matter. But in the aggregate, you get to a $26 million deficit. You get to an expenditure line that can no longer be sustained. As far as the parking violations and the tickets that we have to find a way now to go back and redo all those tickets. And I know our Commissioner of Public Safety Enforcement, Commissioner Byrne, from the first day he's been here, has been addressing that situation. It's going to require a lot of elbow grease, but we now have to go back and figure out if those are now sustainable. Can we collect on those violations and get back some of the revenue that the town could have been seeing in the last 2 or 3 years?
So is your plan to tackle the big ticket items first?
You have to swing for the fence and you have to lay down a bunt. We have to do both.
Yeah.
We're not in a position where we can pick and choose. It has to be an entire plan. We have to look at each department and agency, which we've done, and which the councilman members have been doing on a daily basis. In addition to their other jobs, they're also now liaisons with these departments looking for every cost savings, no matter how big, no matter how small. That's what government has become nowadays.
Supervisor, do you expect layoffs? Do you expect tax increases? I mean, you have a structural deficit, you say, of $26 million, and you talk about making it invisible to the public, but that's almost a quarter of your budget. So how do you make that invisible with such a large deficit?
With regard to providing the kind of services Islip residents have come to expect and we provide so well, the street sweeping, the cleaning of our streets, plowing, all the services that we rely on, our waste removal, those are the kinds of things that we can economize within the bureaucracy without affecting what the public sees as far as their pickup at the curb, for instance. But as far as future plans, as the Budget Task Force figures out how we can save first in expenditures, and then figure out when you incur all of those savings on all these recommendations, what is the delta that is left? And is that delta where the Budget Task Force will come up with a specific plan which will keep everything on the table in order to close that deficit in a short period of time. So right now, we're not prejudging the findings of the commission, the task force, and we're not prejudging what the individual council members will find with their commissioners. So until that work is done, we're going to wait for the results of the finding. We'll have a plan, and then we'll execute that plan.
Is once again drawing from the general fund balance a possibility for closing this deficit?
Not anymore.
There is a point at which, when you deplete your general fund balance beyond a certain point, you will affect your bond rating. The town enjoys the highest bond rating, and we don't want to affect that. So it's our goal not to continue to rob from our future and our fund balance. There will always be some amount of money, and we've done this in most previous years, even during successful budget cycles, where some money is taken from the fund balance, but we have to guard it, and we have to protect it, and we can't rely on it to bail us out.
I'm trying to say.
Yes, ma'am.
I commend you on the job you're doing. And as you move forward, though, I ask you not to lose sight of the people that we're here to serve.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. The town board and I, this could be an entirely different kind of job in good economic times, I imagine. It is a crisis, and we're looking at every single option that we have. You know, there are a lot of faces on the wall behind you of supervisors past, the ghosts of supervisors past, I like to call it. And whatever we do, we have to ensure that when we're long gone, and our pictures are up on the wall somewhere, that there's still a thriving town here, that people have a financially solvent town that isn't driving them off of Long Island, but instead making them proud to be in the town and stay on Long Island. That is our goal. It's going to take a lot of hard work. It will take some sacrifice, both on the part of the public and on the part of town government, but we aim, and we aim every day to try to find that balance. Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments.